make sure the mayor knows how it's going to work.
Yeah, those two are over.
She's on the board of the... Yeah, no, that was meeting.
No, recap.
We got a big audience here.
Mayor? Mayor? Can I explain something to you really quick?
Oh, sure.
Okay. The slides on the slideshow, you've got them printed here, okay? In addition, though, this is not in there, but this is the second item. This is the facility master
that's
plan.
new. Yeah, that's-
They brought that separately. We added it to the slide deck. It's in there, okay? And it's in the proper order. But you're gonna notice that it's not in this packet. So the first item is land use plan, then you're gonna go to this,
And
okay?
I'm gonna open it.
Yes, you can, you're the host. And then, once you do that, then you go into commencement, and that's in here, and everything continues normal. But this one was outside of the packet. So I just wanted, as you walk through it, people point them to this for the second item. Okay? And it won't be in here. Okay? Does that make sense? I'll
It
just
does.
Okay. Hey, how are you?
Oh, I can hear you. Good to see you too. Hey, how are you doing?
Good to see you too. For your meeting. Okay. I need to be here. How are you doing?
That was nice of you. Oh, he's the same. Hi, Sue.
You're actually
No, take it.
This is it. What are you guys doing? I guess you had to get anything.
We have.
Hey, how are you? In the chamber because we're gonna obviously run out of seats. So we're gonna go a few more, but there's overflow in the chamber, so to remind people at the beginning.
We can do that. Brother, what happened? You must be. You must be.
Excuse me, Mayor.
You still got it. Hey, Chris. What's going on, buddy? Well, actually, you got all the popular guys to the back. I know. Here's your fire, right?
First subject.
What do you think? Is that? Let's do it. If we could get everybody to take their seats, please. Go on, hey, Chip.
I do. Thank
We
you.
got all kinds of fun.
I already sneak out from where you're sitting. Oh, yeah. They know when it comes in, you can find us over there.
For the uniform. Got it. I got promoted.
You ready? Chop, chop.
I think.
I don't know. I think I'll play better mistake.
You think? No, it doesn't say that Steve is.
But yeah.
No, I'm perfectly good, right?
Hey, Steve, I didn't mean to take your job, buddy.
Well,
don't you switch? Look at that, I got
Because then we'll
promoted.
be all
Here, just take that sign, put it over there, take his sign, put it over here. And just strike through his name.
Yeah, I think so. Not in our.
Charles, how are you? I'm good.
Kathy's not here yet.
Yeah, it's
How you doing? Good about yourself?
Oh, 3 years?
So Katie hasn't stepped down.
No?
It's 4 years as a master. He announced
It's just we're exempt.
Good evening, welcome to the second joint meeting of Fort Bend ISD and the Sugar Land City Council. Thank you all, Kristen, the board, thank you all for coming. I know this has been, Charles, this has been something that we started almost a year ago, and I think it's gone extremely well. We came to your house the first time, you guys have come to ours. We look forward to coming back to yours. So, with that, item number 1, the workshop, review of 1A, review of and discussion on update of the City of Sugar Land land use plan. And I think that's Lisa Kosich-Meyer. Lisa.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm happy to be before you this evening to talk about our land use plan, the city's land use plan update, which is currently underway and ongoing. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I don't know if this is on, but, so welcome to each of you. Tonight, I'm going to cover just a brief overview of the land use plan. We're going to touch on the public process that we've followed through the update process. I introduce you to the vision that has been crafted as part of this 4-year process. Touch on a summary of the land use plan goals. Also cover some of the key messages about the land use plan. Also introduce you to some of the key maps that are included in the document, and then talk a little bit about our next steps and of course where you can always go to find more information about the plan itself. So when we started this process in 2013, yes, 2013, 4 years ago, we started out with some questions. Looking at Sugar Land, this was Sugar Land, this was us in the 1980s, and so this is the floor property looking towards 59. It's hard to believe that that was the 1980s, and this is Sugar Land today, and we've come quite far since those days. But we asked ourselves, okay, this is how much we've grown and how much we've developed over the last 20, 30, 40 years. What will Sugar Land be like in the next 25 years from now? And so it really started with that big, broad question. And so the land use plan itself is a guiding document for the city. It's one of our master plans, but it provides the guidance for how the city will positively, proactively respond to long-term shifts in the market and demographic trends. It outlines policy direction and guidance for land use decisions. So how will the staff, city staff, planning and zoning commission, city council use this document to guide decision making in the future? Being one of our city master plans, we routinely look at all of our master plans and update them every 5 to 10 years. So this is kind of the normal process of reviewing the land use plan as being one of our master plans. But also considering Sugar Land, we're aging, our infrastructure and buildings are aging. We face new challenges in ensuring that we continue to develop and redevelop to remain a desirable place to live and conduct business in the future. And also looking at the amount of land that's left that's vacant, which is very minimal. The city, we need to be stringent in terms of the types and styles of development that we attract and permit in order to continue to protect our single-family residential neighborhoods within the city, but also be a premier place to live, work, shop, and play in the future. So we embarked on a process in 2013, starting out with conducting some stakeholder group meetings. And we met with a variety of groups over a course of several months. That included ranging from students that are juniors in high school through the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, HOA representatives. We also had representatives from the Fort Bend ISD, Lamar CISD, as well as U of H come and participate in a stakeholder meeting. And really the feedback that we collected helped define and outline topics that we then built into our land use form, which was a really unique opportunity in early 2014 where we invited speakers, experts from the region across the nation as well to share their perspectives on challenges that cities are facing. And it was a 6-part speaker and community roundtable series where the community was invited to participate as well to consider what they hear from the speakers coming to present, and then considering how that should impact or how the city should plan for the long-term success, considering some of those items. It was a great success and was really unique opportunity for the community to kind of hear some really great speakers and ideas in planning. And then, of course, along the way, we've also wanted to make sure that the community is involved in this process. And so we held public meetings. We've also used our city's online town hall tool, which is an online tool for people to share feedback and input throughout the process in the event that they weren't able to attend a kind of more traditional evening meeting. So we looked for a variety of ways for people to provide their feedback on the draft vision, goals, and policies that are being developed as part of this plan. And then I must also give credit to the Land Use Advisory Committee. And this is a group of citizens that the City Council created an advisory committee to focus on the land use plan update. And they looked at applications and wanted to really have a good mix, diverse mix of our residences across the city and ETJ. And several of them, I believe, are here with us this evening. So we have Debbie Kaufman, who is one of our co-chairs, serving on the committee all 4+ years. And then also just walking in was Nish Gurnani, who was also one of our members that also participated throughout the 4 years. So really a lot of credit to them because they took their job very seriously in both weighing and educating themselves about land use topics, but also considering community input along the way and how values shape the policies going forward. So they met nearly 40 times in over 90 hours, really doing the hard work in their working meetings to establish the recommendations that are presented to the City Council for consideration. And then in August, most recently, they unanimously supported and endorsed the plan, which was a great kind of end cap to their efforts. So without further ado, this is the vision that the Land Use Advisory Committee crafted. And so it focuses on the development and redevelopment and ensuring that Sugar Land remains a desirable place to live and do business in the future. But it also recognizes that we'll have to change in response to long-term shifts in the market based on changing demands, demographic trends, but managing that all the while to ensure that the city preserves our overall city appeal. And balancing that with different land uses, preserving the character of our neighborhoods, but also introducing some new types of elements in the forms of neighborhood activity centers and regional activity centers. And all the while also ensuring that we have all of the variety of different types of uses, whether that be office, different types of housing options, retails, and other types of amenities that attract people to live here and hopefully keep people staying here as well. Supporting the vision is a set of 10 goals that range in topic from protecting our single-family neighborhoods, encouraging or creating these new walkable mixed-use activity centers, but also looking to encourage a variety of different types of residential options where they're appropriate, but also focusing on being a great place to do business, having amenities that are attractive to a variety of folks. Ensuring that our outdoor spaces are inviting, that we have connections between our land uses so that it's options for people to get around, not just by car, but maybe also walking and biking, and making sure that there's those pleasant connections between the uses. Balancing our growth over the long term, and then also focusing on redevelopment, fostering redevelopment that is in line with the overall goals of the city. And then last but not least, celebrating Sugar Land, our unique diversity and the unique history that we have here. Back up. Each of these goals are also supported by a series of policies as well as action items, about 50 action items that we, the city, can undertake to reach the overall vision, which is something that is a new element to the land use plan through this update process. Now I'd like to just focus on some of the kind of key elements of the plan itself. And first and foremost is focusing on our single-family neighborhoods. We know that they are very important historically and will always continue to be an important element within our city. The plan emphasizes protecting our single-family neighborhoods. We understand and the plan acknowledges that this will be the dominant type of housing option in our city going forward. It has historically been and it will be in the future. And makes a statement, a policy recommendation that at least 88% of our housing stock be in the form of single-family neighborhoods going into the future. Also, the plan recognizes that we have great high-quality schools here. And that is a primary reason that a lot of people locate and decide to come to Sugar Land to live. So the plan encourages increased coordination with the school districts on development issues as development is being proposed, encouraging that interaction with the school district. Also providing some guidance that whenever there is new residential that is proposed as part of a development, that a school impact analysis be completed to understand what that larger impact may be on the school district and could be helpful for the school district in any of your planning efforts as well. So I know we focused on single family, but there's also recognition that having housing options is also important due to demographic changes over time and also trends in market preferences. And so as we've seen and looked at a lot of data over the course of this effort, we've seen and have known that the average household size within the city has been on a decline, a decrease over the last 30 years. So there's a recognition that, and there's an understanding that a lot of people love Sugar Land, and that's great, but they also look for options to maybe downsize, or so that they can stay here, or that there's options for people maybe newly coming to Sugar Land. They may not be able to afford a traditional single family home right out the bat. So there might be some other options that could be appropriate for the city and for attracting people to the community. Spent a lot of time talking about multifamily. It was a hot topic amongst the committee and in the community as a whole over the last 4 years. And so this plan recommendations acknowledges that multifamily is an appropriate option, but there are some guidance for new, stronger restrictions on multifamily that's being recommended. First and foremost, the style and type of development, multifamily development that was deemed appropriate in terms of the recommendations coming out of the plan itself were that no new standalone multifamily developments should be considered or approved in the future. That they should only be in vertically mixed-use type buildings, similar to the style that we have next door to us here, where there is a commercial retail use on the ground floor and the residential is above. There's also recommendations in the plan for a citywide cap of 12% on multifamily. So no more than 12% of the housing stock within the city should be in the form of multifamily. There are also some site-specific caps in terms of helping to also determine how many units would be appropriate in one location versus another within the city. There are specific areas or land use categories where this type of housing style is deemed would be appropriate. There are also some additional design guidelines that help shape the style and format of that multifamily should take, and then as well as the school impact studies, as well as a transportation study to understand the impacts on the surrounding area related to this type of housing. So all of this would be taken into consideration through the zoning process and the development proposal process by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. And so the plan does recommend that this is an appropriate use, but obviously some stronger guidance for how it should be developed. Kind of switching gears, but looking at the concept of regional and neighborhood activity centers and really looking to town squares, kind of the model for future walkable areas. The plan recommends that these types of activity centers be within the city, and they represent areas that are mixed use, so they have a mix of offices, retail, amenities, different styles of residential options, as well as public spaces for the community to come and gather. The plan recommends 5 areas be designated as regional activity centers, and I'll step through a little bit more detail about what that really means. And then 8 areas that are identified as neighborhood activity centers, and you'll see those on the map represented by the dots. These larger dots here are the regional activity centers, so the town center, town square area, Lake Point, Sugar Creek, the office, commercial area of Sugar Creek, Lake Imperial, and then the university area. And then the pink areas are the neighborhood activity centers. So mainly a lot of the existing commercial areas of the city. Specifically for regional activity centers, these are envisioned to be the commercial and civic hubs of the city. And they are really meant to be not only provide amenities and options for our local residents, but also have elements that draw in people from within the region as well. They're envisioned to be mixed-use areas that are vertically mixed, so again, ground floor, retail, and other uses above. They should have multiple public spaces for folks to gather. They should be walkable and pedestrian-friendly. These areas could also be potential locations for park and rides. Because they are more pedestrian, it should be more pedestrian-friendly. The streets should be more narrow so that they slow traffic. But it's also important in terms of where these areas are designated because of the regional draw. They should be along and near major roadways, and they can have a variety of heights and styles of buildings within them. The neighborhood activity centers are somewhat similar in terms of that they should have a mix of uses. However, they have a smaller scale to them. They are more envisioned to be kind of the main street for the nearby neighborhood, serving the nearby residents. So they should have a mix of uses, at least one public space, still be walkable and pedestrian friendly, have trails, whether pedestrian or bicycle trails, connecting them to their adjacent areas that they would be serving, narrower streets, internal streets, again, to slow traffic. Because they are more closer to the neighborhood areas, they are appropriate for arterial and collector roadways, and then a variety of building heights from low to mid-rise, so no more than 5 or 6 stories in some circumstances. And then, as I mentioned, redevelopment was something that this planning effort definitely focused on, knowing that the amount of vacant land that we have left is minimal. Around 7% of our area is undeveloped. And so naturally the idea is how will the areas that we do have developed redevelop over time, considering this is a 20 to 25-year plan. So this plan recommends that redevelopment be something that should be balanced and considerate of the adjacent residential areas, and recognizes that redevelopment has a potential to reverse and possibly even prevent any decline from happening. It provides opportunities for enhancing quality of life for the surrounding areas and ensuring that we remain economically and competitive over the long term, and helps maintain our low tax rate over the long run as well. In a similar vein to that, recognition that, and there's recommendations for policies in the plan that touch on non-residential development and how that provides benefits to the city, both from an economic perspective, but also providing amenities. From an economic perspective, we know that having non-residential commercial development within the city helps support the cost of city services. We know that our average residential tax bills don't fully support the full cost of providing services. So it's very important from an economic standpoint to have quality non-residential development within the city. And then I'll just touch on 2 maps that are kind of key elements of the plan. The first map is our areas of change map, and we really put this map together to show that the policy recommendations in the plan aren't necessarily envisioning large-scale change across the city. And so what this map shows is it breaks down the city and our extraterritorial jurisdiction into 4 categories. Developing and future growth, which is this peach color, redevelopment areas in this brown color, parks and green space, and then preserve and enhance areas. And as you can see, the largest areas are this preserve and enhance, and those are designated are applied to areas, or represent areas, I guess, that are largely our residential or single-family residential areas, but also our business park. These are areas that are established and that won't see a lot of large-scale or if any significant change over the next 20 to 25 years. Likewise, for our parks and green spaces, those areas are existing and will only be further enhanced, but not changing in character to what they are today. Areas where we may see some change are developing and future growth areas, and these are areas that are either currently vacant, for example, the area west of the Sugar Land Regional Airport, or even areas that are under development right now in terms of the Imperial development, where there is currently single-family and commercial areas developing. So naturally, these areas are seeing some change, or will see some change over time, because they're either vacant or currently developing. The smallest portion, the just under 3%, is our redevelopment areas, and these areas are either existing commercial centers or areas where there are some existing multifamily residential, where the thought is that over time, through redevelopment, these areas will change in character in terms of being more walkable. So a lot of these areas are designated as our regional and neighborhood activity centers. And so the idea is that they will see some change over time. But overwhelmingly, 85% of the city and our ETJ will not experience significant change over the course of the next 20 to 25 years through the implementation of these policies in the plan. The last map I wanted to touch on is the future land use map, and this is kind of the core element of a land use plan. It really is a guide for decision making as zoning proposals come forward or other development proposals come forward. And so what this really does is breaks up the city and ETJ into different land use categories. And there's a variety, as you can tell, of categories ranging from your more typical single-family residential categories to your regional parks or your green spaces, and there's some commercial elements as well. But for each of these categories in the plan itself, it breaks down and identifies the uses that are appropriate in each of these categories, the look, the feel, the character that should be preserved or seen in each of these areas. So that helps provide a good guide, a roadmap for the types of developments that are appropriate and should be approved or allowed in these areas. One of the main points is that largely the residential dominant land use categories make up about approximately 50% of our land area. So again, reinforcing that we're not changing largely in character. We recognize and we know and celebrate that we are a strong residential area, but then we also have elements that help support that with our commercial and office and other types of amenities that we have here. So just to wrap up, just some of our next steps. We are starting and embarking on our review and approval process with the City Council, and we will be having a detailed workshop with them next week at their meeting on December 5th. And then in early 2018, we hope to start on the public hearing and ordinance reading and approval process with City Council. We have been maintaining a website throughout this process, and it has a lot of information, including the draft land use plan itself, as well as other videos and information about the update process that we've been following. So we've really used that as a tool to communicate with the public and have a lot of great information, a resource that they can go to for that information. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have this evening.
Kristen, why don't we start with y'all at the board? We've seen it once before in the council. That way we can better use the time. If
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you guys for putting that together for us. And it is the first time that our board has been able to see that. And it's very helpful. I also appreciate you guys, your team, working with our team to plan, because that is a very important thing for us. It's one of the things that we have not historically done particularly well, and now I feel like that we're doing a pretty good job of it, knowing where the growth is going to be, where schools are going to be needed, if we're going to need to have additions. And of course, we're planning for bonds at this point because of the growth that we're having. So this type of planning is critical for us to be able to make those types of decisions. So thank you to you, Mayor, and to the City Council and to your team for working with us on that. And I'm going to open it up to any of the board members have any questions, comments?
Any question?
I think you're on.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that's what, this is my first time seeing it as well, and it was very interesting to me to see how this is done. And just wanted to really echo the sentiments that our president has around having that ability to do the collaboration of development of our growth for our city and our schools, for our students, to make sure that we plan effectively for them, so that we won't have situations where we have overcrowded schools for a long period of time, or just not being prepared for that growth within those neighborhoods. So just wanted to say thank you too.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much. I'm not going to say the same thing that my fellow board members just said, but thank you. Appreciate your work, and I look forward to the future and our success together. So appreciate you.
Just one more thing. I would like to have copies of the larger maps. I mean, I've got good eyes, but my vision was a little stretched with this presentation. So if I could get that would be helpful. Okay. Yeah, all right,
Mayor, I've got a Lisa, in the past, I know when we did Imperial, there was a request for a school impact study. Is this the same type of study that's being encouraged, or does it go beyond that?
So at that time, we didn't have any real guidance in terms of what to include in a school impact analysis. And so it was kind of a trial run, if you will, in terms of what would be helpful and most informative. And so what this plan recommends is that be a typical, constant thing that we do. I think we will craft what actually needs to be studied and analyzed. That is something we will do kind of at the staff level or through the review process. There isn't any specific mandate or requirement for what be included at the policy level. This just establishes that that's an important thing, an important step to require.
Mayor, one follow-up. But there will not be a requirement that a developer, for example, needs to go in front of this group, the school district board, to get any type of approval to move forward with their development, or we're not encouraging anything like that.
That is correct. I mean, I think it would be information that we could definitely share, and I think it would be very informative for the school district to have that type of information, and we can definitely share that. But there wouldn't be any specific requirement that the school district sign off before the city would approve it.
And Mayor, one thing that I would like to encourage is having a conversation with your group to understand what goes into a study that makes sense. You know, what makes sense for us, for you guys. That way you're getting information that's tangible to everybody. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I appreciate that very much, because one of the things that I wrote down is that I'm sure Charles and his team could probably weigh in on what would help us, because one of the things that just jumps out at me is when you're doing a study like that, particularly in a new development, if we're going to need a new school, or if it looks like we're going to need a new school, many times it's helpful to be able to identify location, land, what they're setting aside, access, roads, because we've dealt with that a little bit in the ETJ on the other side where I live, access to schools and that type of thing. So it becomes critically important, not just for convenience, but for safety, and it's been something that's kind of been problematic for us. So
Good.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
And I would just want to add, then I would like to see then where in the process we do engage the school board. So kind of like a timeline of how, so if someone is building a new subdivision, what kind of timeline do we engage the school board? So that kind of timeline, yeah.
I would suggest that that the city engage or get together with Awesome, because we already do this once a year. We come up with planning.
Who is it, Dave?
It's called PASA, it's
Our
population.
demographer.
Yeah. it's
Sorry,
a
demographer.
Population analysis, I forget what it stands for, but, so they go through and do this once a year. So, rather than kind of
Yeah, it's great.
reinvent the wheel, we kind of already do this, it'd be good to look at what you're doing and coordinate with that group so that a lot of times they don't know what's coming either, so they're guessing. So that would improve, their statistics and their estimates as well, so.
If I may add, we actually engage with them, and so there is some interaction that we
Good.
have with them on an annual basis. So that coordination is kind of already happening,
Good.
which is a good thing.
Good.
Crayola, did you have something?
Yeah, it just occurred to me when we were talking about this that another thing, I don't know if it's included in this plan or not, but was there any discussion at all of a non-traditional school setting? In other words, some of these redevelopments, Fort Bend ISD, we have kind of the standalone building. But it occurs to me that if we're going through a redevelopment process, we might consider some non-traditional school settings sometime in the future. So I'd just like to throw that out there as a thought, idea to keep in mind.
Thanks, Carol. Amy?
Lisa, this plan did not include Greatwood or New Territory, did it?
It does, in terms
Does
of
it?
it covers all of our ETJ areas.
Okay.
Even though they're going to be newly annexed into the city in a matter of short weeks. No, we looked at all of the city's ETJ, including Riverstone and all other areas.
And so whatever we've developed for that, and Riverstone you mentioned as well, and right now we don't have a plan to annex it, but it still affects us and affects the schools. And so whatever your decisions were based on the population of all of those different areas as well as Sugarland. So we're going from 80,000 to 130,000, 125, whatever the total number is. That's all included in the thought process of what we're going to do with our city, so it seems to be extremely useful for the school board as well. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, I would just like to say that the current school board and the current administration must be doing something right, because if we do anything that looks like we're going to mess with schools, the residents come out with torches and pitchforks. So congratulations on that.
You forgot the color t-shirt.
Anyone else?
Mayor,
Lisa?
some
Yes, ma'am.
closing comments. So I do want to acknowledge we do have our other co-chair for the Land Use Advisory Committee that just walked in, Bob Reagan. I just wanted to recognize him as well. And then also, we have reviewed this with our Planning and Zoning Commission, and they have made some recommendations for some changes. And so, as the City Council will be going through their review and approval process, they'll be considering both what the Land Use Advisory Committee are recommended through their process, as well as what the Planning and Zoning Commission. We have our chair with us this evening for the Planning and Zoning Commission, Kathy Huber, who's joined us as well. So glad that she could make it. And I should have probably started off, but I think it might be actually a good segue to the next item. We had the opportunity to visit and share this plan with Dr. Dupree and some of his staff, and they thought it would be a great idea to share it with the board as well. And so that's kind of one of the ways that this started. So we were very appreciative that they were very receptive to that and shared with us that they were excited to get this overview because it really segues nicely into their planning processes that they will be kicking off in the year. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Let me pull my phone. I just want to thank you all for being here. I'm so excited that we're doing it, and I'm so proud of our schools. As many of you know, I think we do have the best school district in the state of Texas, and our kids graduate and really go on to do great things. And that helps our city survive and thrive because we do have the base of those great schools. When you leave here and you do have an opportunity to think of the land use plan, if there are some things, some issues that you have or questions that you have or ideas that you have, please communicate them to us because we always want to have that open line of communication between our city and the schools. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to see where we all go together. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Item number 1B, review of and discussion on Fort Bend Independent School District 2018 B, review of discussion on Fort Bend Independent School District Facilities Master Plan. Beth Martinez. Got ahead of myself.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And good evening, Madam President, honorable City Council members, and Board of Trustees members. It is my great pleasure professionally to be here, but I have to add also personally, as a product of Fort Bend ISD and a native of Sugar Land, to stand before you and share information about our facilities master planning process, which quite nicely aligns with the opportunities provided by the city in collaborating together to ensure that we maintain a high level of expectation in our community and in our school system, and that we continue to draw students and families to our area for years to come. So this evening, I'm going to be sharing with you at a very high level our facilities planning process. I'm going to take you back in time just slightly so that you can see where we've been and explain to you where we're headed in the very near future, beginning in January, and then where we plan to end up in May, which will lead to further planning financially to be able to support some of the items that I'll speak with you about tonight in our bond development program for the 2018 bond. So we take a very comprehensive approach to facilities planning in the district, and this started back in 2014 with our very first facilities master plan, which was developed through a comprehensive, collaborative, and transparent process with the community. Very similar to the techniques and strategies that the city has used. We used these processes to engage with community members throughout the community, throughout our entire district, in small setting and large setting groups, to be guided with the work of a steering committee to get input from the community on options and then further develop recommendations and share with the community for further community input as we prepared recommendations for our Board of Trustees to consider in shaping our facilities master plan that was approved in 2014 and then used to prioritize those needs that were stated in the plan. We looked at our facility deficiencies and related needs for growth in certain areas and additions at certain schools, or the need to build a new school in certain areas. Prioritize that work, and that led to the creation of the capital improvement plan at that time, and then into the development of the 2014 bond program. And you'll see that pattern continue as we prepare for the 2018 bond development. What we're doing is we start out now in January, after going through this process in 2014, let me back up just slightly, we then did update the plan in 2015, because after we did the prioritization of the needs that led to the financial planning, we also determined during that facilities planning process that we really needed to look long and hard and deeply into our attendance boundaries so that we could manage growth near-term and long-term in a better and more appropriate way so that students could begin in one feeder pattern and know from which high school they would be graduating. Being a product of the district and seeing the fast growth that many of you, that you talked about and many of you have experienced, that's not something that we did in the past. Areas grew, schools were built, children were moved with the real current thought in mind about what do we do to make sure that we have kids in schools where there's room. And we took the approach of how do we make this change now so that we can impact the future and to the greatest extent possible cause the least disruption to students and families now and over time. And so that led to our feeder pattern and boundary study, which led to new feeder patterns or established feeder patterns and new boundaries moving forward. So as we work through the planning process now, we're going to begin in January by the development of a 30-member steering committee recommended by our board members and the superintendent to lead that process and work collaboratively with staff and the community. And we will begin by assessing the needs through a facilities assessment process that I'll explain shortly, but really with the outcome of wanting to know how can we better utilize our facilities in the district so that we can offer programs that are applicable now, but with an eye to the future. So we know what is education, just similar to the city. What are the needs in 25 years? What does education look like in the future, in 25 years, so that we can begin planning forward in that way? Ms. James mentioned totally different structures for school possibly, or for delivering programs. So we want to be visionary and strategic about that visionary work. So the steering committee has an important role to play. I mentioned the facilities assessment, and that's where we currently are at this moment. We are working with a firm to
literally walk our buildings and determine where are deficiencies, what are things that need to be fixed, where are areas where we need improvements made, and that will feed into the planning process. We're also in the middle of a building utilization study, primarily at our high schools, or initially at our high schools, to determine what are we doing in our classrooms every period of every day. How are we utilizing those classrooms, and is there room to better utilize the classrooms during a given day so that we can maximize utilization at the secondary level. And so the steering committee, one of their first charges will be to review and analyze the facilities assessment data and the building utilization information so they can begin engaging with the community around that information. As I said, it's a very collaborative and transparent process. It will all be communicated through our website and through multiple ways of engaging in our media sources, as well as direct contact with community members and with our focus groups that will be coordinated through this effort. Through this process, the steering committee will work on options, gather feedback from the community, and further develop those into recommendations. There may be suggestions for additional boundary work or boundary review. We may look through what programs are being offered at certain campuses and how can those be changed to better utilize the buildings or better improve the delivery or the delivery method of certain programs. And what do we need to expand or what do we need to relocate? And so while we will be looking at, as a part of this, our student enrollment data, our projections for our student enrollment and growth or decline over time in certain areas, and that will lead to discussions about attendance boundaries and our current feeder patterns. This process will not include boundary changes, but it may and will likely include theoretical boundaries. So how can we best plan out a number of years theoretically so that then we can do further study following the facilities planning process? So our overview of the timeline leading us until May began in November, December with the building utilization study. Excuse me. In January, we will hit the ground running fast and hard with community involvement and collaboration, and we will have what's called an Educational Futures Conference. And that's where everybody and anybody from the entire community will be invited to learn information, hear information from the district. Where are we now with education and where do we need to be in the future? What is it going to look like in the future? And we'll ask for the community to help us vision that. What will that look like in the future based on research and based on data that we have now? And then we will begin engaging with the steering committee through April. But along the way, I am sorry for the teeny tiny print. It was larger on the computer at work. In February, we'll have another opportunity for large-scale community engagement. And with each of these community engagement opportunities, it's not a one and done. We'll have multiple evenings where we will have, or during the day, opportunities for the community to be involved at the same format or the same forum so that we can get input from as many folks as possible in a very flexible way. We will also, similar to the city, make sure that we have information posted on our website and opportunities to engage virtually. So if you're not able to attend a meeting or community members can't engage in person, have to leave early, there'll be opportunities to provide feedback electronically. So that's our second opportunity in February, where we will look through that data gathered at the Educational Futures Conference and really build that educational framework, which will serve as the foundation for the planning moving forward. In April, we'll have our final community engagement opportunity where there'll be further feedback and feedback based on the options that the steering committee has developed, and then move to recommendation to the board for consideration in April. Excuse me. So our immediate next steps are to finalize our 30-person steering committee and to communicate dates and times for those meetings. We do know that in January we'll have the opportunities for the Educational Futures Conference. In February, we'll have another engagement opportunity through building our educational framework and getting feedback around that. And then again, feedback on the refinement of the educational framework in April, leading to board consideration in May. And without the collaboration of Sugar Land and City Council, I don't see this being as successful as it will be. It's very exciting work, and I hope that this has been informative for you.
Thank you, Beth. Bridget?
Thank you for the presentation. In one of Lisa's slides, we showed in terms of our demographic and shifting market preferences that the actual size of the households in Sugar Land were going down. So for school population in our established neighborhoods, do you see them increasing or decreasing?
In certain areas, decreasing, staying stable in others, and predominantly in our northwest portion. So just to visualize that, in the county area, Aliana area, and the Bush High School, Travis High School area, we see great growth. And then in the southeast, as Ms. Tassan mentioned, in the Sienna area, great growth in that area as well.
But in Sugar Land proper, in our established neighborhoods, what do you see in terms of school population? What do you see happening?
It's leveling and kind of, I don't want to use the term that is not mine, let me be very clear, but aging of the communities in a way and stabilizing. And then in other areas, we're expecting to see as we receive our PASA demographic enrollment projections for this year, that then there are certain neighborhoods where you do start to see that regrowth occurring, as I'm sure you all have seen.
Like Sugar Creek is a good
Yes,
example.
yeah, those that have aged out over time, but then you see a renewal in that increase in numbers of households and numbers of students, school-age students.
Okay, thank you.
Amy?
I love the communication y'all have with the community. I've admired it since you came on, Dr. Dupree. It's been unparalleled, and you have a school board that really works so well together, and that's great. One of the things that really interested me was your discussion about this 30-person committee, and that's a lot of people. And I'm trying to get a little more information about that. So how are you going to determine who the 30 people are? How do they apply? What are the hours? Do we need to send people your way? Or how can they get more information about it? Because I think that's a very important process that you're doing that you probably already worked out, but I don't have a clue, so.
Very good question, and thank you for the question.
It is an important process, and I want to back up slightly. I won't go too much back into the past, but when we did this back in 2014, there was such overwhelming desire for the community to be involved, particularly at the steering committee level. But believe it or not, we had a 91-person steering committee, and we had determined at the onset that we had a plan for choosing a certain number. But at that time, we continued with that large steering committee, and then broke it into smaller planning areas, and it really did work well because it was facilitated in a way that engaged and then did the push and pull to the community and the push and pull for information with the steering committee. And ultimately in that process, it was the members of the steering committee voted on about a 12-member delegate that was deeper involved in the planning process and then shared out to the steering committee. So to move forward to the 30-member steering committee, which seems small to us now after a 90-person steering committee, we've asked the board members to choose 3 members of the community each and recommend membership, and they have some information that I can share out to you all as well about what will the time commitment be, because there will be 5 steering committee meetings and the community engagement opportunities, because there's a facilitation piece of that we'll be asking the steering committee members to take on, as well as work in between the meetings. There's a lot of data and a lot of information to review and then be able to come back and act on and share out within the steering committee questions and then plans for moving forward. So there is a time commitment for the whole entire spring semester through that process, but we do have detailed information about that. And then, so that's 3 members apiece, that's 21, and then the superintendent will be recommending 9 members to the committee.
So there's no geographic requirements, and okay, I know the president lives in Sienna, so she could pick 3 people from Sienna. And I don't know if any of you live in Aliana, but I could see where if you don't know people from Aliana, they may not get picked. And how do you ensure that your committee is evenly spread throughout the entire Fort Bend Independent School District so that you're getting people from each area so they feel like their voice is heard? Because that's always the thing. People want to have their voice heard.
And that is critical. And so that has been part of the conversation and the communication to the board members in that request process, is that it represents the diversity of our community in all ways of diversity, economic diversity, geographical diversity, that we don't have all elementary parents, or that we have, not all business leaders in the community, but a good mix of that membership so that we get voices from across the community.
Are people going to have the opportunity to apply? And then, each person picks 3 from the people who applied, or is it just gonna be, well, I know 3 really good people. I know Tim Stubenraut, he's been here forever, I want him on there. So I'm just trying to understand the process a little better, because I find it fascinating.
Thank you, it is fascinating. And I will defer to Dr. Dupree on the application process to see if that's an opportunity or an option that we
No,
might
it's
want
not, no, really, it truly is, because since the board represents the community, we rely on them to use their network, to use their best judgment. And we've done this before on numerous other occasions, and it's worked exceptionally well because they're mindful of the questions you're asking. So, but that's also why the superintendent has 9 spots. Because after the board submits theirs, we look at it, and then I use my 9 spots, not just for people I like to know, but to fill in any gaps we may see.
And that's a really good question, because we've done this in the past with other committees, and every board member is very mindful of making sure that we choose people we know from certain areas in the community, and like she said, to make sure that we have a lot of diversity. And there have even been times when Dr. Dupree and I will say, well, we're heavy on this side, we've got no one over here. So there are times even when, as the board president, I'll wait to choose mine to make sure that we're getting a good balance. Yeah, making the balance there.
And one thing about us is that, you know, which I love about our board is that we don't stay in our own little neighborhoods. Our circle is really large, and we are really involved in the community, and we touch a lot of people across this district. So I'm positive too that we have a good selection process of not just selecting people that's just right there beside us, but across the county.
And we usually know people who can make that time commitment, because that's the other piece of it. When we've done these kinds of committees in the past, it is a time commitment, and we want to make sure that we get people who are going to show up and who have the ability to invest that time. So we're usually pretty mindful of that as well.
I would add, though, every member of this community has a voice. So you've got to have a steering committee, you've got to have that group of people who can really dig deep. But we have so many other online and large group opportunities. There'll be many opportunities for folks to weigh in.
Given what I've seen from this board and from you in the past, that is one thing I don't doubt at all. I've never seen anybody better at getting an entire community to respond, and I think we could actually learn from you with what you've done. It really is impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, Kristen, Charles. Whatever we can do, whatever you need from us, you have that. I think there's a time constraint with y'all. Is it a firm date at 6 o'clock?
I don't think so. No, I think we're okay.
Okay, we're
If
okay.
y'all are okay, we're okay.
Item number 1C, review of and discussion on Fort Bend Independent School District 2018 commencement ceremonies.
Thank you. I'm Veronica Soper, and I'm the Chief Communications Officer in Fort Bend ISD. I had the pleasure of coming on to Fort Bend ISD at the end of last year as Mrs. Porter was retiring, and one of my very first projects was working on graduation. I had an opportunity to work with the city staff, who were fantastic, and the police department. We had representatives from the fire department joining us, Fort Bend ISD PD joined us. We were able to pull off an amazing process and make sure that we had 11 of our high schools graduate in our new Smart Financial Center. So we were very pleased. And as we were preparing for this year's process, we wanted to take a moment and thank the city for everything they've done to help us come together with a plan. Our school board will be considering in December the contract with the Smart Financial Center, but we wanted to use this opportunity to let the council know that the city staff has just been unbelievable as we plan out this process. So we're looking forward to presenting to our board in December the contract so that we can have our commencement ceremonies for our 11 high schools at the Smart Financial Center. We've made some improvements, and so we're looking forward to actually expanding our celebrations to 3 days instead of 2. So lots of improvements, lots of learning opportunities. for continuously to improve this process, and the city's been fantastic, and we appreciate all your support.
Thank you.
Well, and I wanted to chime in also, those are two of the most grueling days and exciting days as a board member. I think I can probably speak on behalf of the whole board for that. It's difficult, it's challenging, but it's also amazing and exciting and wonderful all at the same time. So going to 3 days, I think, is gonna help us a lot with our stamina and being able to get through it all. So we appreciate that, and just thank you guys for working with, I mean, we had to work out a few kinks from last year. Obviously, it was a new thing for all of us, so thanks for being part of that.
How many students, Kristen? How many students you operate?
How many graduating students? Usually around
Close to 6,000.
6,000, yeah.
I will ask, this is something a little funny, that this year, I would like to have the officers have the pictures of all of us, so that when we come up, we not turn to the backs, or, you know, so, that was my only request, you know, so, yeah. Just a little side note.
Yeah, we circled, how many times have we circled?
There's a story behind it. I'll get that later.
I won't call you officers.
We almost didn't make some of the graduations, that's all.
Questions, Amy?
Couple of things. One, I am thrilled that the graduations are here in Fort Bend, and I was very excited when we opened the Performing Arts Center, and one of my goals certainly was for that to happen. So I'm so excited about that. But one of the comments that I heard along the way, and I don't have the answers, so I'm going to ask you, two things were the cost to the school district, and are the costs, we don't have control over it at all, okay? That's an ACE thing, and so is the parking. But those are the two things I heard about, people complain about, and there's nothing I know we can do, but I'm curious about them. So are the costs going to Toyota Center? Is it, how does that compare? I know there's distance, but what about?
Well,
We asked the
if you
same
don't mind,
question, yeah.
I'll address that, because I'll be candid, that is an issue that we have to deal with, but that's one of the reasons we're so thankful for the city's engagement, because through their engagement, we have been able to match and most likely even be slightly below our other two options. So, yeah, so otherwise we would seriously be considering other options. But they have done a phenomenal job of working with us to keep it in this venue. The one issue that you'll hear also, we've heard from the community significantly, is we have to issue tickets now. But that's the other thing that the city has done a remarkable job by engaging the fire marshal and the police department early. We'll be able to have nearly 1,000 more tickets available this year than we did last year. So that will really benefit the graduates and their families. So we're hopeful by those two major focuses and by shifting to 3 days, it'll really make a difference for the parents' experience at graduation.
What about ingress and egress? How did that
Well,
work out?
going to 3 days, that makes now we can have much more space. The 3 days is, as much as we love our board and don't want them to have 2 long days, the real issue was we couldn't get the parents in and out quickly enough. So by expanding it to 3 days, we now have greater capacity, and we're not gonna have to provide shuttling. There's all kinds of ways parents can come, do their thing, get their kid and go home, and they'll all feel good about the experience.
Well, get VIP passes for all of you, and it solves your problem, okay? I'm just saying, you got that thing hanging, they let you go in. I've seen it before. And in terms of shuttling, you might want to consider that there is a shuttle that comes from Town Square and brings everybody to the performances. That's like $7 or $5 round trip, whatever it is. And that may also help make things be less expensive for parents in terms of parking, make things move more quickly and smoothly as well. Just a suggestion. Again, we don't have any control over that either. It's a separate entity. So, well, welcome. I'm thrilled y'all are doing it. Yay. Dream achieved.
I just have a comment in that when our daughter graduated, it was at the Toyota Center, and we had to pay for parking down there. And I remember it wasn't cheap. So I don't think parking is so much of an issue here in Sugar Land as it was really having to go down to the Toyota Center.
Yeah, it was more about space, and so to go into the 3 days is gonna help us be able to help the parents be able to go, so.
And timing. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, the timing of, you have to have one group of people that's waiting outside until the other one gets released, so, yeah.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Item number 1D, review of and discussion on potential acquisition of the Sugarland Auditorium for cultural arts purposes. Lindsay Davis. And we're going to have Bridget, I know you're going to step out.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council, and Dr. Dupree and Corbin ISD. I would like to start by acknowledging Tim Stubenrausch and the Sugarland Cultural Arts Foundation. I thought, in the interest of time, we could just have the board stand and show that they are engaged and supportive. So tonight's goal is to just have a high-level overview of the background and goals and review the timeline and next steps for proceeding with the FY18 strategic project to evaluate the city's acquisition of the Sugarland Auditorium from Fort Bend ISD. So a little background on some dates. In May of 2016, Fort Bend ISD approached the city about the potential donation of the Sugarland Auditorium, recognizing that the facilities more in line with the city's mission to promote culture. In August of 2016, city staff presented the prospect of acquiring the auditorium to City Council, and we were directed to further research this opportunity. In April of 2017, we provided some research and feedback that we gathered from the Cultural Arts Foundation and also Fort Bend ISD, and we estimated the cost to operate the auditorium. We also received direction that we should do further research on the capital needs, including the bathroom building and a parking agreement and also the conveyance terms. And most recently in September and October of 2017, we reviewed a term sheet with the IG, or the Intergovernmental Committee of City Council, and staff began to seek initial feedback from Fort Bend ISD and the Sugarland Cultural Arts Foundation on these terms. And we provided City Council with an update at the fall retreat. So with our second engagement with City Council at a workshop, we came up with some general acquisition principles. So the next two slides outline what those are. We wanted a cost-sharing structure with the Sugarland Cultural Arts Foundation, where we would equitably finance the ongoing O&M and the capital improvements that would be required. We also wanted a booking structure that increased community usage and the overall usage for cultural arts and educational events. We also, again, wanted an O&M structure between the city and the Cultural Arts Foundation that had an incentivized structure that would increase utilization. And we wanted a plan for the provision of on-site restrooms and the funding responsibilities and the timing associated with those. We also wanted to establish prioritization of usage. So as you know, this is a tri-party agreement currently, and we continue as a tri-party agreement. And also clarity on steps to allow alcohol usage on the site of the Sugarland Auditorium. We also outlined funding for any necessary pre-acquisition updates. There's minor electrical upgrades that are necessary, window updates to the facility, and also the acknowledgement that a new AC unit is imminent. We wanted to make sure that there is adequate parking and that the front lawn acreage is part of the conveyance. And lastly, that the timing of the conveyance would be subject to the execution of a tri-party agreement and all parties completing terms as outlined within that agreement. So the status of our stakeholder discussions. So we have had conversations with the Cultural Arts Foundation, and we reviewed the terms, and they're comfortable with proceeding with the term sheet and dedicating $200,000 to the restroom project that they have already dedicated to date. So that will continue, but it's a sincere acknowledgement of their commitment. Fort Bend ISD has also expressed a desire to minimize or eliminate any upfront district costs and fees related to the usage ongoing. So our next steps. To complete the FY18 strategic project to evaluate the acquisition of the auditorium, we will have a City Council workshop on the proposed term sheet, and we will have staff level discussions between the three parties to ultimate recommendations regarding the term sheet. Future consideration of the tri-party agreement if respective governing bodies support moving forward. So with that, I will take any questions that you might have.
Lindsay, could you recap, I guess for everybody, the restroom cost, total cost?
So this has been, the estimation of the capital improvements regarding the restroom has been done before with the leadership of the Cultural Arts Foundation. We're estimating the actual structure of the bathroom and ticket office with a little bit of storage to be $600,000.
Okay. And can you give a breakdown of where those dollars come from?
Not at this point. That would be part of the discussion going forward.
Okay.
But we do know that the Cultural Arts Foundation has made a commitment of $200,000 at this point.
Okay, so right now we've got of a $600,000 investment, we've got $400,000. Can we say it's committed?
No.
From the Cultural
200,000.
I think what we anticipate as an organization is funding $300,000 near term as part of that project. Longer term, I think there could be a consideration for more, but that just takes time.
Okay, so right now we've got 200 committed out of the 6.
That's correct, at this time.
Understand. Okay, thanks, Tim.
Lindsay, when do you think this future consideration would be actually considered?
The future consideration.
When do you think, the timing?
The timing, we are ready to proceed with after this conversation, so we want to make sure that Fort Bend ISD and the city are on the same page about proceeding, and are we allowed, or can we as staff work together to bring forth the terms of this agreement?
Okay. And I am happy to see that we've expressed a desire to minimize or hopefully eliminate. And I do want to point out something because it's consistent with something that just transpired with the Missouri City Middle School, the old auditorium there, because the same thing came up.
The gym.
The gym, yeah. You know, a couple years ago, that was actually on our agenda to spend like $4.5 million, and that got pulled from the agenda. And then there was some more discussion about spending more money, and in the end, I think we gave it to the county, or sold it to the county for $1. So, you know, we've got to be consistent here. So, just need to keep that in mind.
And that's what I understood too, Dave, was that there was, I mean, because of the fact that there was another transaction that set more or less a precedent.
Right.
You know, your ability to, the whole line, you got to hold the line, or you're in the.
Yeah,
right. So
especially
I do
consider
understand.
especially considering the budget that we're looking for this year. So, I mean, we're a little short.
So, Dave, I agree with you that we did transfer the Missouri City gym to the county, and I think that was an appropriate move for us. I do think, though, that this situation is different. And I recognize your desire not to put a lot of capital investment in the building, but I do think that this is a different situation. At Missouri City, we had just rebuilt that school and the neighboring school. There were two large functioning gyms on that campus for the middle school there and for the adjacent elementary school. So there was no need for an additional gym space.
Right.
This situation is different because historically the Lakeview Auditorium, or the Sugar Land Auditorium, depending on your perspective, has been used by the campus. When my children were in attendance at this campus, it was used on a regular basis. The landscaping area in front of the building, the lawn it was referred to, was part of the playground. The walking trail went into that space. That has been, the walking trail has been moved. A fence has gone up between the buildings. And based on the stats that I'm sure Dr. Dupree has shared with the city, the usage of the auditorium has significantly reduced. To me, I'm concerned about the educational opportunities for our students at that school and in that feeder pattern, because I see the auditorium as an opportunity for community collaboration, and I see it as an opportunity as a learning space. And I think that Lakeview, I can't talk about the whole relationship between the city and the school district and how that's gone on. I think it was, this agreement was done before this administration was in place and certainly before this school board. I guess that's my initial thoughts. And so I feel like I need a lot more information about how the school would access it. I saw one note in a memo that talked about, at the beginning of the year, they'd set out their dates that they need. Well, I know for a fact that that's a burden on a principal to schedule out a whole year's worth of dates and schedule that. The types of events that they have in there, the spelling bee, the choir performance, those things we're not ready. They're not ready to turn that in the 1st of August or the 1st of September or something. So to me, I want to be sure that I speak up for that community and the educational opportunities in that feeder pattern. And I see a lot of creative ideas in partnership with the Cultural Arts Foundation. I'd like to see it used by the middle school, which is walking distance from that building, for their theater classes and their performances, their choir performances, orchestra, all these types of things. I think we can build a collaborative community partnership. But I'm concerned that if we have any barriers to access, that we will not be able to fully utilize it to the best ability or for the best benefit of our students, and that's my concern.
And your point is well taken. The way you framed that, there obviously is a difference between that building and the other building, which was not being used and probably never going to be used.
I also think, so just as a follow-up, I agree that we are not in a position, I'm not sure where we are, what type of position we're in to put a lot of capital improvement into the building. I understand that, and I appreciate the Sugar Land Cultural Arts Foundation for their effort in fundraising over a long period of time. I can tell you that the Lakeview PTA raised money and donated money. I personally handed the check to Bridget, who's not here at the moment, and another lady who I don't know, I can't recall. Sorry if it was one of you. But the Lakeview PTA raised money, donated it to the Sugar Land Cultural Arts Foundation to purchase a piano in that building, and as part of the effort towards the stage and the performance. The intent at that time, and this is, I'd have to look back, but it was 12 years ago now, the intent at that time was that PTA programs would be in there, student programs would be in there on a regular basis, and that there would be truly a shared use going on. I don't believe that's happening right now, and I just would like to speak up for that because I feel that's important to that community.
Yeah, so to both of you all's point, and I think her question is, what is our next steps? Can we move forward and start some type of negotiations? And I think my answer would be yes, to do that, taking into consideration some of these points that we've talked about today. I'm glad you gave that perspective because I'm not familiar with that perspective. I'm not even familiar with that auditorium as much as you are. And so I would like to have those discussions. I don't know if that's a subcommittee or how we will do that.
We're planning to put it on the agenda for discussion.
Okay, so then we can, do that. So my answer to you would be yes, let's start those discussions. And I do agree that that's a really good perspective on the differences between the gym and this particular auditorium.
Thank you.
Kristen, is just a point of clarification, Rel, to your point, is your board in support of the transfer of ownership, or am I hearing that it's more of the ownership would remain with the school district?
We haven't had that discussion,
Okay.
and that's what's going to go on the agenda. I mean, Dr. Dupree did talk to us about some of the legal portions of it in a closed session, and we did know that it was proceeding and that our administration was proceeding and having conversations.
but we as a board have not had a conversation about the terms, the term sheet that's mentioned here, and that's something that we will have on our agenda probably in December.
Why don't we do this then? You know, I think in all fairness to your board, you know, let's let you have that dialogue so that you fully vetted. It's come through council. I think I can say that we're generally in favor of it. There is the gap, there is the funding gap. I mean, we're 400 shy of where we need to be in order to have a restroom, which we feel we need in order for us to have the ownership. Certainly, you know, the preservation of Lakeview Auditorium is first and foremost. It's a piece of our history that I think we all recognize that we want to preserve. And the discussion now needs to be how best to do that. So why don't we let you all have that discussion, and then I think we can then come back, you know, following some feedback from you all, and we can have some further discussions. Staff can have some further discussions about what that looks like. But right now, I think there's some fundamental things that you all need to address as a board before it comes back to us. Brett?
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor. I agree with that. I think that the preservation of the Lakeview Auditorium is important to that community and to our city and to our city's history. And I can say that my own children learned a lot about the city of Sugar Land and the city's history by touring that building and visiting that building as part of their educational experience. So thank you for that. I also think, and I'll speak to Dr. Dupree, I also think the other piece of information that we need to have or think about as a district is we need to understand a plan, or have a plan for the Lakeview campus. And maybe that's part of this facilities master planning process, that if we had a comprehensive plan for the Lakeview campus, then we could figure out how the auditorium fit in or meshed with that, or if there was additional facility that would supplement or supplant the auditorium, and how that could work. And maybe then it becomes special occasions, or I don't know, graduation, 5th grade ceremony, things like that, types of use. So to me, the thing the district needs is a comprehensive plan for Lakeview Elementary. And when we have that, then, you know, then I'll feel much better about having a tri-party agreement and understanding the terms of that.
You know, the other thing I'd like to acknowledge is the Sugar Land Cultural Arts Foundation. Tim, you and your board have done an extraordinary job. I mean, you guys right now are operating that facility. And I think if that's okay with you, I mean, I think where we've come right now is I think the board being the Fort Bend ISD School Board, needs to have that, you know, that deliberation. And then I think we come back as the three parties, and then have that discussion later on. Do you agree?
I do, and Dr. Dupree, we're at your disposal for providing clarity and information to the board related to the communication that we have with not only the local school at Lakeview, but also your staff to help us out day to day to make sure it operates effectively. So we're here to provide you any information.
And let me, if I could just say one other thing, and that is, the thing that I appreciate about this effort is the building has use, it's being used. And there's people in it, people are coming to performances there, children are doing dance programs and theater programs there, and that's, to me, that's life into the building is what's needed. So appreciate you guys and your efforts in that, and let's figure out how we can work together and collaborate.
Mr. Mayor?
I mentioned that I'll come to you, Carol.
Ms. James, I think all your comments are really well taken. I think you bring up some really good points, but you know, I was supportive of this from the perspective of, there were two things that were important to me, was the preservation and enhancement. Because we're not taking on this asset just for the sake of taking on an asset. We're taking it on because it fits with the tenets of the city relative to preserving history and the cultural arts aspect to it. So what we view is an expansion of what they're doing, not a limitation. And so I think the communication between what is the school district's desire to use the facility should be spelled out in some way, and if there's room in the agreement to bring that in and have a scheduling, I think that should be there. But from my perspective, we're not trying to take this away from you all. This is to actually enhance the facility, make it a really great thing long-term, no matter what happens around the facility, no matter what happens with the school. Having it under the jurisdiction of the city preserves it long-term, well beyond even the school district. So I just view it as having a multiple approach to it. But I think once you hear a little more about it, you'll be more encouraged about why we're proposing to move forward with this.
Carol?
Okay. Yes, I just want to echo the comments that, yeah, the preservation of this auditorium is extremely important, as is the enhancement. And I would just like to thank everyone on the Cultural Arts Foundation for all the hard work that you've done, all the money that you've raised, all the love and hard work, everything that you have put into this. Thank you so very much. And I know that, the Fort Bend ISD originally approached, the city saying, okay, this is more in line with the city of Sugar Land's mission. But then, of course, Grail, you brought up a good point, saying that actually it may be more in line with FBISD's mission. So I agree with what the mayor is saying. It'd be good for you all to have that discussion about that. And I totally agree with your point about having a comprehensive plan for Lakeview Elementary, and then that will help us all figure out the optimal way to move forward with preserving and enhancing this very special auditorium.
Tammy?
In many ways, I echo what Councilmember McCutcheon said. I really admire all the work that the Cultural Arts Foundation has done to enhance this auditorium, but I'm saddened that in the last 12 years, the students have lost their ability to use this beautiful auditorium. And when you talked about the parents donating money for this auditorium, to me that means they were investing in their children's future, and that was to be a neighborhood school auditorium that children in the future would get to use. And it also made me remember when just a few weeks ago when we learned the history of a pool that the city was considering closing. And you learn the history, and the city almost closed it. That was the discussion. And then you find out this wonderful history. It was donated to the city, and they worked so hard. I want to make sure, and again, when I started, I said education is the most important thing. This is an auditorium that is right next to a school, and the students should always have free access to it, and the teachers should have free access to it. And that should be, to me, the priority. Yes, preservation, but the children come first, and they always should. And you have a real jewel there that children could, and in my mind, should be using. And if it's locked off or gated off, that makes me sad. You have that opportunity. So I would really encourage you to really look at the facilities master plan, and specifically with that, look at Lakeview Auditorium and figure out what really is the best use of this school's auditorium with relation to the school. I love your idea of incorporating the middle school, but the more you use it, that's what it's really there for. We can discuss later how the city could use it, but I would encourage you certainly figure out within the school district's purposes, what's the best use for this, because that's such a rich history, even in what Grail told us. So that's the first thing. The second concern I do have, in all honesty, is the bathrooms. $400,000. We just cut huge amounts of things in our city because we don't have money. And I don't see anybody having a spare $400,000 to build the restrooms right now. And that's not really conducive to a premier venue that people can go use. So I'm not sure when or if those bathrooms will be built anytime in the near future. And that would really cut down on the use as well. So again, I would encourage you to, Grail, you brought up great points. I really admire your thinking. I love the history. And figure out the best use for this auditorium. And then we can, and I would love for all of us to come back together in another meeting in the future to discuss it, rather than it just going through the city. So we're all on the same page as what will happen with it.
Mayor,
Tim,
can I
yes,
just
please.
add a couple of things.
Please.
Just addressing a couple of issues. When the exterior of the building was completed, it was very important to protect the asset in all the improvements that these three parties all helped raise dollars for. And that's when the fence was proposed and put up and paid for by the Cultural Arts Foundation and the funds that we had raised in order to do that. It's never been my understanding that we have impeded on the school's ability to use it. We've always promoted the broader district's ability to use the building. The building is not used for performances during the days. It's used for auditions and other things, but yet scheduling is coordinated through not only Fort Bend ISD staff, but also staff at Sugar Land Cultural Arts Foundation to make sure that the school gets to utilize it when they want to utilize it. There are a number of opportunities that they can have throughout the year and find it easy to book those opportunities into the future. So it's my understanding that that's never been an issue, and we don't intend that to be an issue for it. We just intend to hope to have more usage in the building by all parties within the community.
Thank you, Tim. Mary Joyce?
Wonderful, and thank you all for being here. I love when we do have this opportunity. I think a lot is done and a lot is achieved. Cultural arts, I know so many of you. Thank you for everything that you've done, starting with you and Merle. So much. It all started with our wonderful Don Smithers and his lovely wife, Merle. What I wanted to say is I was thinking about the meeting that we had, and I think Bridget was there. We had a meeting at Lakeview with some of the, the principal from the elementary was there, and a lot of, the neighborhood people were there, etc. And we had a great discussion, and we discussed the auditorium as well. Now, I think Lakeview Elementary, I think we'd all recognize that it's in some need of repair. I don't know what your capital plan is, but I'm hoping that it's in 2018. My understanding there, and I live in District 1. I have a home on Lakeview, so this area is important to me as it is to so many people who live in Fort Bend County, not just Sugar Land. And the auditorium, it got that facelift and it's been invigorating. One of the things, it was my understanding that the elementary school, because I think the children come first. It was a school, it was meant to be a school. I think the children and the education comes first. So that was something that was really important to me. And I spoke to the principal as well. It's my understanding that the cultural arts and the city, that basically in order of usage is first the school. So I wanted to confirm that, and then cultural arts, and then the city. And I know we had a meeting at one point when we had an update. One of the things for me that I think is very, very important, no matter what we do, if we do move forward with the city, acquiring the building, whatnot, I think it's paramount that the students have the first use. And I think about the middle school. We need so much more in arts and theater in our schools. For so many years, it just deteriorated. And the middle school in Sugar Land, I think any way we can get those kids into something that arts and theater and whatnot, and utilize the auditorium, I think that's wonderful. So I guess I agree with Grail that I think an overall assessment, I don't know, you don't have to answer me if not, but is Lakeview in the works for 2018, or at least being looked at for 2018 improvements?
Well, there's actually funding in the 2014 bond for improvements on the school as well.
Okay.
But we're, as Grail mentioned, though, we are looking at longer range plans even too that could result in anything from, as we discussed at that meeting, a complete redo,
Right.
a complete restoration. That's the work we need to do to determine what long-term what we're going to do.
And
But I do, in saying that, I want to be clear, there has been and there will, but there's no discussion about closing and just not using it at all.
Right, and that meeting helped so much. I just wanted to say that to you, Dr. Dupree. All discussion of, oh my gosh, they're going to close the elementary school, it was shut down. I haven't heard anything myself, I can tell you that, I haven't heard anything. So maybe this is the appropriate time in that comprehensive view, as Grell had mentioned, to to look at the auditorium. I think it's the city, the school district, what we care about is what's in the, and the cultural arts, what's in the best interest of the students and our community.
Kristen, I think we'll let your board deliberate, you guys decide, and then we'll let your staff or you guys please give us a heads up. You know, I want to thank you, your board. I want to thank, you know, your staff and our staff. It's easy to come together for a joint meeting, but you have to recognize there's a lot of work that goes behind this. Charles, Allen, and our staff, I know we've worked collaboratively to make this happen. It's easy for us to show up for an hour and a half. There's a lot of work that came into this, so I want to thank you all for that. I think this has been, you know, what we hoped it to be. The communication lines, I think, between Fort Bend ISD and the Sugar Land City Council have never been better. I think with our staff have never been better. We remain, as I know you do, we're committed to you all. I know you're committed to us, and we look forward to having many, many more of these meetings, you know,
Absolutely.
productive discussion.
And thank you for hosting. We appreciate you having us.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Motion adjourned.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Back to work.